he did things that we didn't think he could do. He'd figured something out. He averaged over 120 in a game. He beat Raymer van Barneveld, and at this stage you're thinking, hang on, the second coming of Martin Schindler is about to happen.
Hello, welcome along to the latest edition of The Story of here at the MODUS Super Series, where we look back at some of the careers of some of the great players in the sport. And tonight we are looking back at the career of one of Germany's most successful player of all time, in Martin Schindler, the Wall, who of course has picked up European Tour titles, also picked up titles on the floor as well, and he really is emerging as perhaps that first German player who could pick up a first major trophy. The asset Paul Nicholson's watched a lot of his exploits in European Tours, in Players' Championships, and a lot of the big events that he's played in over the course of the career. I suppose we always say this question when it comes to German dart players. We're waiting for that one that can really hit that next level. And it feels like with Martin Schindler that he's the one that's most likely to catapult German darts in terms of a playing capacity to a level that they've been crying out for the best part of 10, 15 years.
That's absolutely right. I think you don't have a Martin Schindler right now if you didn't have Max Hopp doing what he was doing in 2018 and slightly before and after that, because Max was lifting German darts to a new level. Max could barely walk the streets. But if you think about the timing of around then, Martin is playing World Cup with Max. And this is not far after Martin Schindler was just a steward on the European Tour. He was wearing a red T-shirt. He was telling people where the bathroom was, where they could get a drink, where your seats are. This is a ridiculous story. But if you look a little bit deeper into Martin's career, he played youth darts for Germany in the WDF. And he was part of the burgeoning scene in a country like Germany. And this has got a lot to do with the generation before Max Hopp. You look at Andy Krökel, you look at Andre Velger and Jenard Tutt, people who were doing things in Germany. You don't have Max Hopp unless you've got those guys first. But Martin Schindler is a direct product of the success of Germany from around 2012.
We'll talk a little bit more about Martin Schindler's career in just a second, but you mentioned the synergy between him and Max Hopp. Obviously, we've seen them play at World Cups together, have really good campaigns together. Was there almost, to a certain extent, I know Gabriel Clemens is largely involved in this, almost a baton pass between Max Hopp and Martin Schindler, with Gabriel in the mix as well, in terms of the bastion of German darts?
That's about right, because as fair as we can be about Gabe Clemens, he hasn't won a title yet. As much as making the semi-finals of the World Championship is a great achievement, you are judged by what you win, and Gabe hasn't done that yet. So when Max Hopp came to the European Tour in 2012, he went to the Dutch Darts Masters, and this is the first year of the European Tour, and in the Netherlands, nobody had heard of him. He turned up to this tournament, and all of a sudden he's beaten two highly fancied players, and I'm running into him on the Sunday afternoon thinking, who's this kid? He's 16. We don't know who he is. He's tall. He's got impeccable English. He can obviously play. And he was hard to beat. But after that, everybody knew who Max Hopp was. So from this point, you're thinking, where's German darts actually going to go? Because we used to go to German Players' Championship events. Places like Gladbeck, Dinslaken. And there'd be some decent German players, don't get me wrong. But none of them were world beaters until Max took it to the next level. And the next level from there was for people to join him, to get on his back and to challenge him and make things harder for other people when they came to Germany. Martin started to do that, but it took a bit of time.
And I suppose as well, because Max had taken that mantle initially, yes, there was a pressure on any German player to succeed, but because Max was the one that everyone was looking at as the real focal point, did it allow players like Martin just to, in a little bit more of a quieter sense, be able to build up their own reputation?
That's a really good way of putting it, because there were many people who tried. I know that Fabian Hertz, for instance, was constantly qualifying for European Tour events. He wasn't having a great deal of success, but he was able to get through a home nation qualifier and have a crack. But then if Max was playing that day, the audience knew who he was and they would put pressure on him to perform, and he'd be the one orchestrating a 3,000 or 4,000 strong crowd. it was around about this point where people started to realise that there were other players out there, and it was just a matter of finding them. Home nation qualifiers in Germany were plentiful, so we were getting plenty of names, but only some of them would succeed. I remember a game that Robert Allenstein played, and he did a couple of cracks before finally getting a win on the European Tour, but when he won, it was an event. And we thought, this is what German dart players need to do. They need these opportunities, they were getting them, and eventually we would find somebody like Martin.
And it's such an intriguing story, as you mentioned, going from a steward on the European Tour, probably somebody that you had to go through with your accreditation when you were commentating on events, and the fact it goes full circle. You don't get many stories like that.
No, you don't. I don't actually remember Martin being a steward. I don't think I ever passed him. At least I hope I didn't. But I know when he's made his European Tour debut, and at that point I'm thinking, looks like a decent player. At this point, you're not thinking he's going to be the most successful German dart player within 8 years. Because I think he understood that technically, mentally, and maybe even from a talent perspective, he had a bit more work to do than some other players. But the encouraging thing is he was willing to do it.
Is that one of his key strengths then, his work ethic?
Yes, it is. But he hasn't done it all on his own. I think he's got everything right. I think if you look at the way he's been shepherded by Jonas Salashoglu, someone who's worked really, really close with. Jonas is a phenomenal, clever guy from Greece who's helped a lot of players in Martin's area. So if you've got the right person giving you the guidance, that's a great thing to have. But inherently, Martin is saying to himself, if I want to make improvements, I'm willing to experiment. He has experimented with different points, different equipment, different techniques, but he has settled on something in the last few years that has really started to click.
He had a brief stint in the WDF around 2015 time, then got his tour card at the beginning of 2017. Normally, is probably the normal way of saying it, players that come onto the tour for the first time, well, they maybe just see how it goes, that they have that idea they want to stay in the 64. But was it, again, because of the fact that Martin's a German player and they were crying out for success, were the parameters, again, just a little bit different? That there was almost a feeling that he has to hit the ground running straight away?
Yes and no. I think in his own mind, he might have said, this is going to be 2 years where I can try and figure this out. But I actually qualified through Q School the same day as Schindler. It was a great day. I qualified with Kirk Shepard. I think it might have been Tony Alcinas as well. We had a good day, a good few days. And I'm looking over at Martin, who I knew pretty well at this point, and I said, I'm really pleased for you. Well done. And he said, yeah, okay. And he didn't seem like he was getting ahead of himself, because even at this point, Martin's only 28 years of age. So he's still got loads of time ahead of him. So this is 2017. He's 20. He is very, very young. He's still a development player. And he would obviously go on to make the World Youth Final. But he was getting better as each season would go on. There would be peaks and troughs. But what we didn't know at that point is that he needed a couple of years on tour before he figured out about going backwards before going forwards.
Well, I suppose tour life's kind of split up into two halves. Obviously, he lost his tour card, got it back straight away. In terms of the first half of his career, before he lost the card initially, there was moments, as you mentioned, the World Youth Final. There was maybe other signs that he could be trending in the right direction, but there was just a feeling of there's a good player there, but is he going to take that next step?
If you delve into where his success came, it looked like it was more likely outside of Germany. His first European Tour quarterfinal, I believe, was in Austria. So if you take him out of the pressure-filled environment of being the home nation player, I think he was finding himself away from Germany. He went to Gibraltar. He looked a totally different player in Gibraltar. I remember once seeing him play against Callan Ridds. I think it was in 2017. And Callan said to Martin that they wanted to play a little joke on me, and they said, our collective age is less than your age. So they were looking at me as a bit of a veteran. At that point, I actually thought I was quite old. But at this stage, you saw a lighter side of Martin's mentality, because in Germany, he looked like someone who had the weight on his shoulders. So it took him time to figure out how he wanted to be the player he wanted to be.
And then, of course, that drop-off from the tour. Now, we've seen, obviously, in buildings like this in the past, players drop off tour, particularly players of Martin's kind of ability. They can drop off tour, they can fall by the wayside a little bit. It was the end of 2020, got it back straight away. It was that European Cruise, was that year, that was that COVID year where everything was split up in terms of Q School. And it wasn't just the fact that he qualified for that Q School, he qualified for it with a little bit of style. And there's indications that maybe losing that car was possibly for the good for Martin in retrospect.
This is a lesson that everybody should learn if they are a young dart player. If they go to Q School thinking, I've got to get my card, if I don't, it's the end of the world, don't think that way. Think about the Martin Schindler story, because you can get a card, but losing it and taking that step back and looking at the world slightly differently, it can be the making of you. At that second Q School, he did things that we didn't think he could do. He'd figured something out. He averaged over 120 in a game. He beat Raymond van Barneveld, and at this stage you're thinking, hang on, the second coming of Martin Schindler is about to happen.
Let's talk about getting that tour card then for a second time, dropping off tour, regathering it straight away. In terms of what expectations are the second time a player gets a tour card, and particularly a player like Martin Schindler for the second time getting a tour card, where initially do you think they were?
It all changed at that Q School because he was attaining a new standard. And once you do this, it grabs the attention of analysts very quickly because the information is so easy to find. People watch Q School matches via the Dart Connect system, leg by leg, whereas in Q Schools gone by, it was wait for the results to come in via a slower moving website. That's the beauty of Dart Connect. It's giving you information minute by minute, second by second. And when big numbers were put in by Schindler and you looked at various runs that looked very destructive, we're all looking at each other saying, hang on, Schindler is a different player now. He seems to have found something. So after that Q School, the expectations were higher, and we were right to put them on him because he would become a different player post-2020.
He would be a completely different beast. In 2021, he'd go on to win the European Super League, which is a huge event in Germany. And I suppose that was the first real big one, that first one which kind of said to us, right, Martin Schindler is somebody that looks as if he is moving in the right direction.
I think it was at that point where we're thinking he's the number 2 in Germany. Max Hopp is sliding down the rankings a little bit. Gabe Clemens is at this point is the number 1, even though he hasn't won a title. But he's the one who's hoovering up ranking points. Yes, he's not doing it on the European Tour, but he's doing it on the floor constantly for a period of seasons now. And when he wins the PDC Europe Super League, it's winning something, isn't it? It may just be a domestic thing to get to the World Championship, but what coincided with this was better Pro Tour form as well. It was all happening for him. And yes, it was a dramatic final, but the thing is, he won something, and it doesn't matter what you win. Winning is a good feeling, to be the last person standing so you can move on and win something else.
He beat Max Hopp. He'd also then beat Florian Hempel to get there. And then around about that time, that was kind of when Florian was at his peak.
Florian would go on to win that title himself in the following season, but that was seen at the time as a tournament that Florian lost as opposed to something that Martin won. I think we look at it slightly different now with retrospect, because as good as a player as Flo is, he hasn't gone on to do what Martin has done. So it just goes to prove that if you win something, confidence can be built on from there.
And then I suppose it's that natural, right, what's he going to do next, Martin Schindler? Because, look, in terms of ranking play, it was steady. He was moving up the rankings at an attainable rate. But this is a German star. And this is somebody that the German public are willing to win at any cost. And particularly with Riccardo Pietrezco obviously picking up a Euro Tour title as well at the back end of 2023. Did they feel like then there was a pressure on Martin Schindler to take that next step and become a big-time winner in the PDC?
Well, there was a danger in 2018 when Max Hopp won the German Open, and obviously he won a Players' Championship in Dublin as well. At this point, for a period of 5 years, no other German player was winning anything. And Max is probably sitting in his seat away from the tour thinking, is anybody else going to join me on this rostrum? And when Pietrezco won the German Darts Championship with a ridiculous doubling performance, I think that lit a fire under Schindler like never before, because he'd had close calls. He'd been to a Pro Tour final. He was constantly knocking on the door of final sessions at European Tour events. But something happened between October of 2023 and early 2024. Something happened. He said, I'm not having this. I'm not having everybody else winning and me being put behind. Because when he went to Rhysa in 2024, he won in his own backyard. It's pretty much a local tournament for him, Rhysa. So I see what Ricardo did as the thing that got Martin Schindler really going.
Let's talk about that then, because that was the moment, wasn't it? That's when we knew, right, Schindler is here. And not just did he win that tournament, he won it quite emphatically as well. He had to beat the king of Rhysa to get the job done.
Well, we could sit here and call Gezi Price the king of Rhysa and say that it's some sort of baiting technique to give him more than he deserves. You've seen what Price has done in Rhysa. He owns that arena. He's played so well there and destroyed people of great note. So for Schindler to pick up his first title where someone is probably at their strongest, that says something. And it was a fabulous victory. But was it really that much of a surprise? I don't think so. He was going to win something. It just so happened it was there. And as a result, very soon he will be going to defend it.
Was that a case of waiting for when that was going to happen? And maybe that waiting can, particularly for Martin himself, can feel a little bit longer than perhaps it probably was. Well,
it could have been. He could have won something years prior to this. He could have woken up one morning and felt indestructible and won a players' championship somewhere. It just didn't work that way. Some people have got to grind their way to that first victory. Some people get it within a first season. It doesn't happen for everybody, and it's harder now than ever to get that first title. Once you get that winning feeling, it will feel somewhat addictive. You want to have it again pretty soon. It would take a while to get that second victory, but it would be in a very similar setting, and this time not on German soil.
And that was important as well, because it was a Swiss Darts Trophy. It was in Basel. It was outside of Germany. No German player had won a Euro Tour event outside of Germany. Was that also an important thing? Because there's a lot of people that say with German players that the crowd, the fans, the fact it's so partisan works in their favour. Did Martin just kind of put a fear into bed as well when he won that particular tournament?
Well, there's a yes and a no in this, because in the last couple of weeks I've had a conversation with Martin about this. I asked him outright, what's it like being a German player playing on a European Tour event in front of that crowd? And that's your bunch of people, essentially. And he said, it's hard. He asked me if I could imagine doing it. I said, well, actually, I never had home games, so I wouldn't know how you would actually do that. But he said that when you play in Sindelfingen or in other places on the European Tour, it's really tough because you feel like you have to provide for that audience that wants that victory. So for him to do it in Germany, I think was harder than to do it in Switzerland. Max Hopp won in Saarbrücken. Obviously, Riccardo Pietreczko won in Hildesheim, which are very vociferous crowds. Max Hopp's other victory was at a Players' Championship in Dublin, which had no audience. So for Martin to win in Switzerland, to him, it probably felt a little bit easier, even though he did have a big slice of luck with Ryan Searle missing darts.
And then he'd back that up with his first Pro Tour win in 2025, kind of, I suppose to a certain extent, on the Pro Tour circuit at least, completing that set.
Well, of course it is. You ask many top professionals that there is a ranking of events or a litany of different tournaments that you want to tick off your list. First thing, you want to win a Players' Championship. He's now done that. You want to win the European Tour. He's done that twice. The next level, you're looking at World Series events, and you're looking at big ranking majors like the Match Play and the World Grand Prix. World Championship is at the top of the pyramid, of course. But I see the next development of Martin Schindler contending more in match plays, World Grand Prix, European Championships, where he's never won a game in lots of attempts, even though he was the number one seed in 2024. There are distinct improvements to be made. And he's already got a goal. He wants to be the highest ranked German player of all time. And Max Hopp, I think, was 18th at one point. Nobody else has beaten that yet, so there's another goal for him there.
That leads us on nicely to what do you think the future will hold for Martin Schindler? What do you think he'll walk away having achieved in the game?
Well, he's only 28. I think he's got at least 15 years ahead of him. He's an incredibly sustainable player. He looks after himself. He's got a great team around him, a super little family as well. I think he's a great example of a modern German dart player who speaks excellently in multiple languages. And I think Germany should be very, very proud of Martin. His journey is very aspirational. He's still got a lot of ambition. I would like Martin to be the flag bearer for German darts for many years, and it's up to everybody else to catch him.
Be interesting to see. Thank you very much, Nico. Thank you very much for watching the latest edition of The Story of here on Pluto TV.